Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Alex Snowdon, member of the States of Alderney and one of our States of Guernsey representatives. Alex, good to see you again.
Morning, Tony. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. And yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you.
It's been 6 months since our last chat.
Is it really?
And you currently hold the record for the number of views. So let's see if you can actually exceed it today.
We'll see.
Let's start off with the question of the Guernsey meeting last week and this bit of a U-turn, I think, as far as P&R were concerned, in terms of putting through an amendment to actually withdraw their original proposal. Is that correct?
Sort of correct, Tony. So as you know, both representatives spoke quite strongly about the impacts on GST on Alderney and felt it was disproportionate. I think I've probably gone over that quite a lot of the situation already. But I think what they've actually done is, rather than take that vote on GST, as we know, I think it was item 4 on the original policy letter, they've put that amendment in place to 3 options. The first option basically is for them to go away and do a lot more homework about what sort of taxations they can make some revenue from. Second option is public engagement and stakeholder engagement, to have a bit more of the buy-in from the community about what tax options they may be doing. And the third option is that it will be reported back to the States of deliberation no later than July next year. So I'd strongly say it hasn't gone away. It's going to be. Yeah, so I think some of the public seem to think that GST conversation has maybe disappeared, but it hasn't at all. I think it's still on the table. However, what I'm quite pleased that the P&R committee seemed to be very much in listening mode, and I think all the debate took in all the feedback, and then they put something together and have a look at other ways that taxation may be able to be taken, not just, I think before the focus was quite much on GST, but hopefully there may be other avenues to go down.
Because the paper they came up with was very heavily weighted for GST options 1 and 2 and the health tax, wasn't it? And, you know, they didn't look at anything else.
No, exactly. And I think it comes back, we've had this conversation before about the corporation tax, but with the global pressure on corporation taxes, are they going to move to bringing in some sort of corporation tax so they don't get blacklisted? I think we've talked about this before about the EU and other organisations who may feel that there does need to be some sort of corporation tax. So I think what I've tried to highlight with the deputies I've spoken to, and I think there may be conversations between Guernsey and Jersey, but we're actually stronger talking to everyone who's basically got 0-10 and saying that you're all in the same situation with the taxations. Should we all move to something at the same sort of time? I think there is a fear if Guernsey moves to it straight away and the other jurisdictions are still competitive, that their financial industry may disappear very rapidly. And obviously that would be very concerning as well. So it's getting that balance right. However, I still think there's time to look at other avenues of taxation. And as we know, GST for Alderney would be hurt us very hard.
The health tax was basically an income tax, wasn't it? They said they were going to hypothecate, but, you know, I mean, it's just bit like the UK and national insurance.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. But the problem is that we've got the ageing demographics, we've got the pension pot running out, and then we've had the COVID factor. So there's quite a few areas where there needs to be a higher taxation to provide those public services. So I think the truth of it is we're all going to need to pay more. However, let's look across the whole board, not just focus on GST. So I'm pretty sure Policy and Resources are going to go away and do a lot more homework. But it's likely, I think, if we're honest with everyone, that GST will be reappearing next year in that July debate. And then whether the same outcome happens or not, we'll have to see. But there is a massive pressure on public finances.
The deficit is supposed to be about £80 million. Now, is that a one-off deficit, Alex, or are we going to have an ongoing deficit, bearing in mind the fact that health and care are going to contribute more and more to the requirement for more money?
Well, I think this brings in the conversation why the taxation is needed. So I think in simple answer is that will carry on and it needs to be addressed quite soon. If you want those services to be delivered, health, education, your pension stuff, all sorted out, there does need to be the money found for it. And I think that's really what the P&R committee is trying to highlight is they need to get ahead of the game. And I think Mr. Deputy Hellier has said, 2 minutes to midnight, to emphasise how important it is that they do find new revenue streams. So there are massive pressures on public finances, and we've got our transfer services with Guernsey and everything, so we're all connected with that with our fiscal union. So it's an interesting time. But I think as long as we take the steady approach and look at everything on the table and not take everything off the table, I think before it may have been just, as we say, a little bit too focused on the GST debate. Let's explore all other avenues, and also what savings can be made across the board. I think that's an important one as well. You know, how can things be streamlined, savings, and actually stopping, I'm not saying they're wasting money, but let's make sure that the money is used correctly where it is used.
Because the thing is, of course, coming on back to GST, you'd have to create another department. You'd have to have more civil servants. We all know that the first 3% goes in admin. So from that point of view, it's not a particularly sensible tax, I don't think.
Yeah, so the policy letter, I think, said it was about £800,000 to collect GST. That's actually the administration costs, so potentially more civil servants to collect that taxation. However, you've also got the businesses affected, that they're going to have to maybe make more people available to do all the admin, which could be a bit of a nightmare. So for businesses with a turnover of more than £300,000, they were proposing a 5 to 8% GST, depending on which option. So yeah, as you say, it ends up with the business factoring it in, but it could be something like the overall cost of like 10%. Hopefully it wouldn't be, but it's just really concerning. And when you take something like Alderney Electric, at our electric price at 45p a unit, and you compare it to Guernsey at 14p a unit, it doesn't seem fair putting the whole thing onto Alderney as well as Guernsey. It's disproportionate. So I think those conversations need to happen. But as at this current point, the States of Alderney and Alderney Chamber of Commerce are against GST in its current format.
How are you finding the new regime down there, Alex? Are you finding that they're a bit more sympathetic to Alderney?
Yeah, that's a good question. Absolutely. I think what's happened with COVID and staycation is that unfortunately people with the COVID pandemic couldn't travel where they wanted to, so they were coming into Alderney a lot more than they were before, and that's brought the communities together, which is absolutely fantastic. But it's also brought the politics together. So there's a rediscovery of the island. There's a bit more of an understanding that there may be opportunities in Alderney, and it's actually, rather than look at Alderney as a burden, look at it as a place of opportunity. So there's quite positive conversations happening behind the scenes with the Guernsey deputies about actually how can we make Alderney start moving forward. If we're doing better, then it's better for them as well in the fiscal union. So it makes sense to move into a better situation and look at opportunities and look at the Channel Islands together. That's something that's coming across quite strongly. So I've been suggesting to Guernsey deputies, which I'm sure they're doing anyway, and also Jersey, they need to get a bit more around the table, especially with the energy stuff, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later on. Yeah.
Because you know, I've always felt that really Jersey, Guernsey, and to a lesser extent Alderney are too small to be separate jurisdictions almost. It would be really good if you could have some sort of confederation. The amount of money you could save in terms of civil servants and things like that, if it was all one sort of central administration, would be an awful lot, I think. But
absolutely, speaking with one voice, you know, we're talking about the corporation tax and everything, but if they have the same sort of stance, they're stronger together as the Channel Islands, rather than, obviously they are competitive, but I think on certain stuff they need to be more united. I know they are, but it's still, I think, a bit more of a push maybe.
Yeah, very much so. So anyway, we will watch to see what happens in the rest of the world regarding corporation tax. But Ireland have already said that they'll have to come into line by increasing their tax from 12.5% to 15%. So you know that shows that any of the financial centres that wants to sort of stay on the white list is prepared to, you know, pull the line.
Well, I think it's a bit of a stepping stone, because what the Biden stuff is basically saying is, my understanding is it's businesses with a turnover more than 750 million euros who would be affected, bringing that 15%. But I think if we look at it, it will start affecting lower down as well, which is just a matter of time. And I think, to be quite frank, the sooner it happens, the better for the bailiwick, so we can actually hopefully start raising some money, rather than look at other stuff that potentially we don't really want to get into too much, potentially GST and other pieces.
Can we come on to Aurigny? You very kindly sent me through some clips which were very interesting about the debate in the States regarding Aurigny. And so essentially, could you tell us currently what the implications are as far as the PSO, the public service obligation, is concerned?
Yeah, so I think where we were with the PSO, it was taking quite some time to actually get that signed with the old Policy and Resources and Aurigny. I'm pleased now that the PSO is signed, so that gives us confidence that we will have air services in place, and that's a £2 million subsidy basically per year. Problem being that we were looking at something like £3.2 million subsidy, so it's actually a reduction, and what we've now got is the two newer Dorniers. But we've only got 2 planes serving Alderney, so you haven't got the capacity. However, it is important that our PSO is signed, and we've still got the confidence that we've got the Southampton route from Alderney and obviously the link to Guernsey. So the PSO is a positive step, but I think that's in the short term, and now it's looking at what the medium and longer term is, and I think it's important we take our community along with us, whatever that may be, because I think the issue is the funding potentially isn't going to be in place for the longer term, basically because of the financial pressures that Guernsey's got as the bailiwick on spending so much out. However, we have got confidence in the next 5 years with that agreement between Aurigny and the States of Guernsey for delivering that service.
I got the impression that if they hadn't written off those losses and recapitalised, Aurigny could have become insolvent and gone into liquidation. Was that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting debate, and some characters are a little bit more interesting than others.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure we want to talk that or not. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And the feeling I felt was the Assembly that this was sort of the last chance for Aurigny. So it was like, vote of confidence for Aurigny. Let's try and get this sorted. I think it's important that we do highlight that we've got a new chairman at Aurigny and a new CEO. And I actually went to 3 of the presentations, and kindly the CEO of Aurigny gave a presentation to the Alderney States members. Hopefully in a few months there'll be something for the Alderney community. But I think there is a fresh positive relationship, and there seems to be a willingness to start delivering. I think, Aurigny's always been the issue between Alderney and Guernsey, because we've complained about the service not being up to standard that we should expect. And Guernsey have sort of turned around and said, do you realise how much this is costing? And then we've had a friction between it. But I think that's settled down a little bit now, and hopefully we can move forward on what the medium and long-term plan is for Aurigny serving the bailiwick, and in our interest, Alderney.
They're very keen to get onto a single type plane situation, aren't they? Which would be the ATR. Would that mean strapping the jet?
Well, I think it's important. So on the debate, a certain deputy did highlight the losses for the Aurigny services between 2015 and 2020 being £16.3 million. Now that's eye-watering sums, and I think we actually dispute those numbers if we haven't actually seen the books. However, we're not going to get into that too much now. But I think we need to understand that we need to move away from how there can be a saving with Aurigny and what that saving may be. But I think it's also important that we do look a little bit back in the history, because Alderney just wants a fit for purpose service, which is affordable and reliable. And it was a Treasury Minister in a statement in 2015 who actually said getting the Dorniers would be the cheaper option. It hasn't turned out like that. I don't think Alderney should be blamed for the situation that it's into at the moment with the Dorniers. All we would just want is a good service, which I don't really think is much to ask for. But you're absolutely right. So now they're looking at the ATRs, basically turning the whole fleet of Aurigny into the ATR, so getting rid of the jet, potentially getting rid of the Dorniers. There's a feasibility study happening at the moment with the Alderney Runway Extension to actually understand what that would involve. So as we know, in 2018, the States of Liberation, the States of Guernsey, approved £12 million for the upgrade of our current runway. And now there is a feeling they go a little bit more, but what are the associated costs involved? Does it need to be the security fence, rebuilding the terminal? What is that cost? And then weigh that against what that £3.2 million was per year for our services, which is now £2 million capped. And would there be a saving in the longer term using the ATR? However, understanding what that service would be, and what the benefits and disadvantages would be. So that's really important that we actually get that CEO of Aurigny, if that is an option going forward, to present to the Alderney community. I think it's important, I do say that he's a very strong character and determined, and I'm sure he'll be answering all the questions when that public consultation does happen, because my personal view is I'm very impressed with him and the chairman of Aurigny.
Well, that's good news. Essentially, though, if we go for an extension of the runway, we're trading off one thing to effectively subsidise another. What I mean is this: if that allows Aurigny to run ATRs into Alderney, obviously the States of Guernsey bear the cost, but if you sort of work that against the deficits of the past, does it really make sense?
So I think let's analyse that a little bit, maybe. So The airport is owned by the States of Guernsey. Aviation services technically aren't part of the 1948 agreements. However, I think, because the Aurigny was started in Alderney, it's our airline at the end of the day. That's how it all began. And there is an expectation that Aurigny will deliver aviation services for Alderney. I think the problem being that, as I go back to, the money isn't there going forward to give the subsidy level that we've got at the moment. So then it comes back to a conversation that if you want to carry on with smaller planes, and this is where we don't really want to get into, but if we don't want to carry on with smaller planes, do we look at the Alderney community to fund the aviation services if Guernsey think another model would be cheaper for them? So then would we have to pick up the difference? That conversation isn't happening, but I just think we need to be aware of it, that then moving to the longer runway for benefits, financial benefits, and also capacity. So we've got 2 planes. How many people can we get into the island with 2 planes? I think the answer is that we can't grow the economy to maybe the size that we want to grow it to. If you've got the larger planes, you can bring in more people when needed. However, as you're saying about the daily trips and everything, I believe there would be definitely a daily trip to Guernsey and also a connection to Southampton. But I think that will probably come out with the business plan, but we won't have the frequency that maybe we have at the moment. So there's pros and cons on both sides of the argument. But I think what we shouldn't be is negative on either side. I think we should listen to the presentation, ask all your questions, and then make your judgment as a community where you would like to go. But we know that aviation is so important for us living on an island, and I think in the past it hasn't been right. But let's try and move forward positively with the States of Guernsey and Aurigny and find out what solution works for us.
I think a lot of people are concerned about going down to Guernsey for medical appointments and finding that because of the way in which the service, the timetable might operate with an ATR, that they have to go down the night before and pay for a hotel and this sort of thing. I think if they can be reassured that you could still go down and back in a day.
Yeah, so my understanding is, and I suppose these are just very simple discussions because we haven't actually seen the back business plan. We've seen the strategy, which went to the States deliberation from Aurigny, but we haven't really seen the detail of it. I suppose that's got to come out more about what the actual service is, if it is feasible to move into that service. But you're absolutely right. You wouldn't want to be staying down the night before and added costs and actually throw away that into a situation everything's costing more. But my understanding currently is that there would be a daily return if that option is valid. But it might be so much money that needs to be put into the runway that it's not feasible. But that's why that study is being done. So I think let's have a positive approach to have the feedback, listen to what the concerns are, pros and cons, and the community can make up their mind if it wants to go in that area or not going in that area. But I would just say, from what I'm hearing from policy and resources and other members down there, is that the financial issues are really starting to bite a bit. So it may start turning around and saying, well, if you want to do something else, maybe us fund it. And we have, as a community of only 2,000, we're very limited how much money we actually do have. We've got everything else to pay as well.
Yeah, I think people over here are pretty flexible in terms of their attitudes. And, whilst they probably like 2 flights a day to Southampton, for example, they'd put up with 1 flight if it was a reasonable sized plane at a sensible sort of time. I think, the argument about people wanting to go to London and back in the day on business probably doesn't apply anymore because of Zoom and other things. And to that end, I think, possibly they'd accept 1 a day to Southampton. Remember, the plane can hold, 72 people, isn't it?
No, so much. Yeah, it's about absolutely. But just to give you a little bit more information about the plane, so it will be a reduced payload, I believe. So
sure. But even if it took 50, that's 2.5 times what a Dornier can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a hope that maybe if we did move to the longer runway, the medevac situation would be sorted out. That's quite an important issue where you may get the operator that's serving the other islands that be able to fly into Alderney. At the moment, I think they can only fly in if it's a perfect day. So that would be resolved. And also you've got other, jets and aviation that could move into the island. But I think what we've actually seen, looking at the economy at the moment, is the staycation's been very good. Property prices are high, which is bad for the younger people trying to get onto the property ladder. But you've got a confidence and investment into the island with businesses. Look at the hotels that are sold and another one that's been basically done up. I think Alderney's in a very good situation at the moment, but it's important we keep this positive buzz moving forward. I think that's
very much so.
Being forgotten. which I hope we won't be. But yeah, it's just making sure that we're moving forward.
I believe Deputy Mark Hellier's actually bought a place, hasn't he, over here?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe they all would, but yeah,
Well, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
All right, let's get off aviation and get on to the 1948 agreement and the review. Is that still taking place, that review, or is it, sort of grinding slowly behind tax and Aurigny?
Well, I think with the 1948 agreement, it's an interesting conversation because I think we've got to look at the whole scope of it. So yes, our demographics are getting older. However, everywhere else is as well. So if you take a snippet of now, it's probably not the best. You've got to look at actually how you move forward and where you see the island going to. So I think with the conversations that we're having with Guernsey at the moment, it's more about bailiwick relationships, how we can streamline certain areas and how things can work more efficiently. Rather than probably getting into the nitty gritty of it. But I think, the 1948 agreement review sort of been on the table for quite some time. We know it's been reviewed before, but with a positive buzz between the islands, it's almost like, so economic development, as we know, isn't a transfer service, and we've got our economic development here. However, it's in Guernsey's interest to sort of provide a little bit of support of economic development on the island so that the demographics maybe change, or more business opportunities that would then help actually the cost of the transfer services. So it's those conversations which I think are happening at the moment, is that how do we sort of push Alderney into being more of an attractive place for your younger people to get to. And I know that childcare is that was actually on BBC News today. But ticking those boxes to try and help the cost of the transfer services, if you see what I mean. So those conversations are going very well at the moment, and those are led by Deputy Mark Hellier and a few other members of Policy and Resources. So yeah, it's okay at the moment, but I don't think there's any outcome. It's more about how we can work together as the bailiwick and make things more efficient if possible, without reducing the quality of the level of the service, is my take from it.
Yeah, I mean, looking at newcomers to the island, people that move over from the UK, they're always very welcome here, of course. But should they not be making some sort of a contribution to the health side in the form of perhaps being obligated to have compulsory medical insurance for, say, a period of 5 years? I'm talking about the over 50s here.
Yeah. I mean, Deputy Peter Roffey made quite a strong case last week with what they're proposing with social security payments and everything. And I think steps are being taken that potentially that will start coming onto the table a little bit more. So I think initial steps are being taken. But I think, what one of the deputies highlighted was, for the bailiwick, is someone that moves over here, likes it, which is wonderful, but then brings the parents to the islands who may be of older age, and then suddenly they're needing all those services without paying into the system. So yeah, I think it's how you put the barriers, but without stopping people. But there's some sort of payment there, that there is a payment system, so that basically our younger generation isn't paying for the older generation that potentially haven't paid into it. So I think that conversation is happening and it is taking place, but it's how that can be implemented in a positive manner.
But Guernsey are fairly looking to make well, it is savings, isn't it, really, if you can get people off actually paying for health. Guernsey are actually looking that way at the present time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, because of the pressure on the public finances is looking across the board. I think all of the committees really are looking at how they can be more efficient and save more money. But you're absolutely right with regarding bailiwick health payments coming into the island. I think that's something that's being strongly investigated. And as I say, last week, a couple of steps were taken towards that. But if you had some private insurance, because I think people actually do have private insurance quite a lot, and they come here and then realise, actually, do we need it?
Yes,
and then they drop it.
So
if they're happy to go along and keep paying the private insurance, well, then that would be paying towards it. So that might be the option that potentially we move towards in the longer term.
Yeah, you obviously don't want to penalise young people that are coming over here to work. People that are coming over to retire, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you all want to get those younger people so they pay their taxes, Tony.
Yeah, sure.
And with the tax debate, though we are in a fiscal union with Guernsey, I sort of did try and highlight the point that, if we could, I don't know if it can be achieved, but sort of bespoke taxes, people are still paying taxes, but it's still attractive for them to come to Alderney, then it's in Guernsey's interest to get those younger people into the island. So what would create that niche that they can move into the island? And I think PwC Centre of Excellence has been a wonderful example of something that's been set up and is employing something like 18 people here now. So how can we roll that out with other sectors on the island to create that employment here, and then they pay the tax and the social security paying into the pot? So it's these conversations are happening, and I think there's positive stuff happening behind the scenes, but it's just let's keep pushing that and taking that forward.
How are the States of Alderney getting on with their energy policy?
It's a good question. I think we've talked about this before, Tony.
We have. We
had one done that never went to the States and went onto a shelf with a bit of dust. It's going well at the moment, but I think there is an understanding. I'm going to speak more on a personal side because it's unfair for me to speak for other members, but I think there's more of an understanding that this energy policy needs to be more of a Channel Island policy, because I think with Guernsey and Jersey, where are they headed? So I think the French situation's really highlighted how we need probably our own security with electric in the future. In the longer term and maybe in the medium term. So what energy should we be looking at? And maybe there's something that can supply the whole of the Channel Islands, whether that be tidal, wind or something else. But is there something out there that we could look into making that would actually provide electric to the whole Channel Islands? So I think it's important, and I did raise this actual question with Deputy Lindsay de Sommeray last week, that Alderney and Guernsey works quite strongly together with the energy policy, but also Guernsey and Jersey work together and see if there is something that can be thought about that maybe can be implemented. Because I think in a situation, if you've got the French, you've got a bit of a hold over the extension lead, as it were, with threatening to cut it, then that doesn't give a lot of security in the future. I'm sure they wouldn't do that, but it doesn't give a lot of security in the future if that threat is used as a bargaining chip. So I think now is the time, and there's so much talk about going green, and the whole world seems to be going green, which is absolutely important. And we've got assets on our doorstep that I think it's important that we should be looking if we can use those to supply energy for the Channel Islands.
Looking at the tidal side, I did see, and I sent you through an article in the Telegraph about Simek Atlantis having some financial problems because they're linked to Mr. Gupta, who of course is the Liberty Steel and Lex Greensall man. You were able, however, to come back with some information about Normandy Electroline. Is that how they pronounce it? Electroline in the French?
Yeah. So I think we saw a survey boat last week, wasn't it, here doing some work with Ras Blanchards and being based in Alderney. It looks like they were surveying for the Ras Blanchards project, which is the Normandy company that was set up between Atlantis and the French government to basically look at tidal array. The question really being is who's going to be the player in that. So I don't know if this company is basically it's not independent on Atlantis, and if it's going to do its own thing. But I think it's probably positive that we're seeing some sort of movement out there with that survey ship, because someone's paying for it. Though of Atlantis is a bit, I'm not quite sure if uncertain is the right word, but I think we just got to watch the space with what happens.
Yeah, very much so. Because of course, Alderney Electricity had heads of agreement with Simek Atlantis, which possibly isn't, going anywhere at the moment.
No, so I believe the PPA agreement, the price couldn't be matched what they were offering and what AEL was offering. That they couldn't formulate a deal in the end. So they haven't actually, apart from the heads of term agreement, which I think probably maybe not valid anymore, they haven't actually entered into anything with Atlantis. However, we watch closely what happens with the Ras Blanchards project. And also, I think we've got to understand and acknowledge that there are other energy tidal companies out there like Nova Innovations, who I think have teamed up with Stella, who is a French company, and they seem to be doing quite well with their turbines. So, one player may be not strong or something happening, maybe someone else will come on the scene. So, and it goes back to tidal is important that it develops, but it's still in the early stages. So it's important we just and monitor the situation with tidal.
Should we be shoving up a couple of windmills?
Well, is that on island, Tony? Where are you proposing?
Oh, my field to do. We'll put one in there for a start.
So I think on island it's always going to be a bit of a tricky situation, because
but haven't we, as a population, got to accept the fact that things are changing will change, have got to change. And therefore, whilst you might not like the idea of a windmill on the island, if that's the way to get reasonable cost electricity, perhaps we have to go along with it.
I think it's got to be evaluated, absolutely. But from my side of it, I think you should actually look if something can be put offshore first, if there's offshore rather than on the island, and then it gets into that conversation: is whatever we're thinking about, can that be joined up with the other islands as well, and what would work for the whole of the islands? Because in debate last week, I referred to the States of Guernsey again. There was quite a strong feeling that there should be some sort of large array, whether it be wind, whether it be tidal, that should power the whole of the islands, to put it in a very simple context. So is that something that we should be moving towards? I think we should be moving towards it. But I go back to, if we have those conversations with Guernsey and Jersey, seeing if there's something that can be done in the bigger picture. If not, then we go back to energy security just for ourselves. So whether that be a wind turbine out on the sea, or potentially on the island, but then you get the environmental stuff. So it's all pros and cons, but we do need to move away from oil, because that's not good going forward. No,
absolutely. Now, what about the island plan? This is the economic regeneration, is it? What's happening there?
Yeah, I think it's going out for public consultation at the moment, which is good. So I hope everyone feeds into the public consultation with the island plan. I think it's basically putting your level of different areas that we need to take forward, and as a community and the states all need to work on delivering. But then we need to also look at, which isn't part of it, the next stages is the strategies. So what strategies actually help to implement those different areas on the island plan, and how we work together as a community about how we want to move forward on certain areas. So it's a step in the right direction. But then we need it's almost like the headlines, and then the homework needs to be that. That's probably where we're at with it. But I would encourage everyone to input, whatever they want to feedback with the island plan, and come and talk to States of Alderney about it, because it's important that the island plan has buy-in from the community. Otherwise, it probably isn't much of a plan. So this is the first step. If people are happy, or they want areas changed, or they want areas added, absolutely raise that. And then I think it's for the states and stakeholders and community then to look at actually how you implement these different areas and what they actually mean, a little bit more detail about how you achieve where you want to be headed as a community and the States of Alderney.
No, the previous one didn't get very far, did it? Was it in 2015?
I was trying to give you a nice pitch there, Tony, and you just pulled it.
Well, sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to pull the rug.
I think. Okay, let's start again. We need to start from somewhere.
Yes, you're absolutely agreed.
The old one went on the shelf and got dusty, probably with the old energy plan. So there's nice lots of stuff. But we've got something fresh now. So let's try and engage with this public consultation. If you're not happy with it, or if it's no good, tell the States of Alderney and they'll change direction. I'm sure if that's what the majority of the public wants to do. If you are happy with certain areas of it, input into that, and let's try working on the strategies that are going to support those certain areas if that's where you want to be headed towards. But I think, we go back to, for instance, air transport and sea transport. There's something that we talk about the whole time, because an island it's so important. Well, what is our plan with that? What is our strategy? Are we aligning with Guernsey? Are we wanting to do something different? So I think if we've got an understanding about where we're headed, we can align it with other places, for example, with the air and sea, where we're outside sources, and then how we connect up. But I think if we're going off ping pong everywhere, we're not going to do too well. So I'd say probably at the moment it's the simple headings for our community about where we basically want to move forward with. And if we're happy with that as a community, then we start looking at the more detailed strategies with external factors which may connect to those, and then try and implement it. But for the problem being, the States of Alderney's got so much to do. You've got housing sort of crisis, you've got the air stuff, you've got like childcare, as we said on this morning. It's spread quite thin, so it's actually trying to get some of these action points actually delivered, because we're probably quite good at talking, but actually delivering it and focusing and getting our civil service resources to implement it is absolutely key to move forward with different areas.
What happened to the World War II memorial questionnaire that was supposed to have been issued in October? Is that still going to come through, or?
No, I saw you put on the list for a question, and thank you. My understanding was I unfortunately missed the last PNF because of the States of Guernsey tax debate, But my understanding it went to the P&F committee and was meant to be going out for a questionnaire, because I think it's important that the public have the consultation. So I believe that is still happening. No one's told me, or I haven't heard anything that anything else has changed. So that questionnaire, which may have 20 or 30 questions, should be going around to the island to see what you think about these sites, where you want to be headed. But I don't, if you're suggesting it's been pulled, I don't believe it has been pulled.
No.
I believe it's still going out, but maybe it goes on, or maybe it goes in with the island plan. I don't know, but save on the staff.
I was just wondering, not pulled, slightly lost.
I don't know. I believe it is still. As I say, I'll go and find out about it. But I believe it's still going out. So we've got lots of things to fill in, haven't we, Tony?
Right, we certainly have. There's no doubt about that. A couple of quickies. Fort Torgy, is that still on, or have the developers pulled out totally now?
Well, I think they made contact 2 weeks ago,
right,
but I don't know what the
sign.
But I think really, if we take a step back, Torgy is a tremendous asset. We know it is. Therefore, do we need to reevaluate what we may be wanting to do or wanting to be headed with Torgy? Because I'll speak personally again, I think we get caught up that it's going in a certain direction, when actually we better take a step back and say, actually, what could this asset do? How could we use it? Could we do joint venture stuff? Should the States of Alderney invest? Should someone else take it over? Where is it moving? And I think the problem is now, at the moment, it's been caught up with the current proposal, which I would still like a public consultation, which I think I've asked for. I still like a public consultation about the current proposal, but it's almost stopping any other proposals on the table. Now, I don't know what they may be, but I think we maybe just need to press the reset button on Torgy, because it is an important aspect, and actually try and see where can we move towards with Torgy. That's just my personal view, which I say may not be numbers.
On the second attempt, did they actually come up with an option agreement with a limited term? Do we know?
Well, you're pushing me today, aren't you, Tony?
I'm sorry. But,
I think they put certain ideas,
time limitations.
And if you look at the accounts, we have been spending money dealing with these developers. And to be honest, maybe the time has come that we now move away, unless there is going to be something concrete on the table. And as I say, reevaluate that asset and see what it could be used for, because it's a tremendous asset. But I think we've just got so caught up, unfortunately, I'll be quite blunt, going round in circles, and we're not really going anywhere. And I think this has gone on for too long, is my personal view. However, if the current people want to do a public consultation, the public are all happy with it, fine, let's crack on. But we haven't had that opportunity yet to have that connection with the public. So maybe I'll raise that one as well for you, Tony.
Okay, another one. and the last one, Alex, right. And that is what's happening about the marina. Is that still proceeding, or has it come to a grinding halt?
No, I believe, I need to get more into the detail with the big projects, don't I? But I believe the marina is still being talked about. The States of Alderney Policy and Finance Committee has set up a working group, which is the Marina Working Group, and they're meant to be dealing with the proposals from the current developer to hopefully take something forward. And that's probably about as far as I can go with that one, because I haven't really heard anything back from that one. However, I'm more than willing to listen to the proposals of the marina, and hopefully some positive stuff can come forward. I'll go back to that, I think probably public consultation or something about what the bigger picture is and what that development is. But, Alderney has been talked about for some time, does need a marina. But I think that conversation we've probably had for the last 40 years. But yeah, I'm absolutely more than happy to get around the table with those people. But hopefully the working group that's been set up about the marina will be reporting back to the Policy and Finance Committee, and hopefully the full States in the near future. I know there was a chief plea at the last States, which was good to highlight the matter. So that's where we're at the moment, I think.
Alex, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure to listen to you, and thanks for all you're doing down in Guernsey as well, because I think it's very important that we have good representation down there, particularly in these dark days in which we live, as it were.
Yeah, I think it's just important to realise that those relationships are a lot stronger, and it's a lot more work together. So I think we just keep that going forward, and let's listen to either side with Guernsey. Obviously Alderney's got its view, but listen to Guernsey's view as well, which may be different as we've heard. But things are good. Let's keep them positive. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks very much, Alex.